Hello, this is EmuKiller, and in this video I'll go over my guide of how to go about learning Mewtwo in Project M 3.5. Feel free to click on any of the chapters in this table of contents to skip ahead. So before getting into the video, I just want to cover just how incomplete this guide is. I'm going to cover mostly abstracts because the details to cover every matchup's bread and butter combo would take obscenely long, and frankly I don't know every matchup. Which goes into my next point: I suck. I don't have the fundamentals that other top PM players have. I just sort of picked up a character people used to not have practice against and did well because of it. Not only is my understanding limited, Project M 3.5 is also really new right now. I'm writing the outlines of this video only 2 days after 3.5 came out. In 6 months, even 3 months, this video is going to be painfully out of date because so much is unexplored in Project M that everyone is going to get a lot better soon. Finally, this guide really doesn't do much. Maybe it gives you certain things to think about while you practice, but in the end you're going to have to teach yourself. A lot of top players get there by not watching other players or reading guides, but just beating up computers in training mode, and with 3.5 you now have access to a really good training mode. So briefly I'll cover the patch notes leading into 3.5. Up tilt has had its knockback reduced to become borderline completely useless. This is going to affect your neutral game, as up tilt used to be an easy and effective way to lead into big damage versus fast fallers. Down tilt can now be interrupted 4 frames earlier. You can look up the term IASA frames to understand what that fully means. This helps your lower percent game a bit and compensates for forward air and up B having additional latency, because now it's tougher to approach with them. Down smash can't be interrupted until 3 frames later, which is pretty negligible. It just makes it a bit easier to get punished if your opponent blocks it. F-air is now 1 frame later, active on frame 6 instead of frame 5, making N-air your fastest aerial by a frame. F-air is still really good and helps you escape combos. Up-air deals a little less damage and has increased knockback to compensate, so that it deals roughly the same amount of knockback. His grab has been moved a little bit forward, extending its range a little bit and makes it a little less likely to grab opponents behind you, but it still happens. Shadow Ball has 5 more frames of startup. This is pretty big. It affected me a little bit in terms of sometimes when I'm recovering from getting knocked down, I'll shoot Shadow Ball, and now if you get hit out of it, you lose the Shadow Ball charge, which is actually different than melee. But the plus side is that the end lag after the projectile appears, it remains the same. So follow-ups after Shadow Balls feel just the same as 3.02. Another change is Confusion. It now has increased knockback growth and I'm pretty sure more end lag. So it makes it pretty negligible as a chain throw, which people were starting to figure out in 3.0. But it's still a command grab, which makes it really good. And at higher percent versus anyone, or especially characters that fall faster, you can still combo into F-air. Let's see if that showed up. Nope, that was only 1 hit combo. But trust me that it's pretty close to being a true combo. Disable no longer clanks with other moves. I just found this out. I don't really use Disable. Frozen does. But yeah, maybe Disable's better now. Well, it is better, I just never use it. The biggest change, obviously, is going to be up B. So first off, it has 1 more frame of ending animation after you appear next to your opponent. So escaping combos is the same, but appearing next to your opponent takes 1 more frame to act. You can't hover out of up B at all. There are some people who are figuring out that on stages like WarioWare and Yoshi's Melee, if you're on the ground, you can do a horizontal up B off the stage and get teleport. Don't know if it's possible on Battlefield. It's not. There you go. But you can still second jump after grounded up B, which is really important for combos. Like if you get Mewtwo really high, hey, even higher than that, up B, second jump forward air. It's really important. So you can't second jump out of aerial up B at all. Like even then I'm not using my second jump, but I still can't use my second jump after up B. And a big thing that affects me is before, to do that ledge stall, you could be right next to the ledge, and the way I was able to do it so fast is that you don't need to let go of holding down in order to do the ledge stall, but now you do. So you can no longer be holding down to grab the ledge. You have to reset your controller to neutral. That's a pretty big change. Similar to Melee also, you get stuck on solid parts of the stage. So let's say I was on the ledge here. If I were to do a up B 45 degrees up, I would clip through the stage. Oh, I ditched it then. But yeah, now you will get stuck. Let's see if I can, like that. You kind of get stuck on solid objects now, with like a little bit of momentum carrying you. So that's another really big change to up B. I'll go into up B later, but essentially as a neutral game tool, this has been toned down a lot. And for recovery, you're going to have to be a lot smarter with where you up B, since after you use your second jump, if you up B, you're helpless. Dash attack has been moved forward to be more disjointed. Kind of tough to see. But there's a hitbox right, where the actual dark energy is. Before it was a lot closer to Mewtwo's arms. Jab has had its knockback changed. I don't really know how this affects it. Hover cancel is now 5 frames of landing lag instead of 4. Again, another pretty minimal change. And the biggest is your tail. It's now 85% of what it used to be. So you no longer have the best sword in the game, and it actually drastically affects matchups. So versus characters that used to not have better priority than you, you're going to struggle a lot. So people with swords or stupidly disjointed broken characters like Luigi and Ganon. The big buff that Mewtwo gets is having hover roughly 20% faster top speed, and horizontal movement before you start hovering is conserved. So if you get a lead start on hovering, you get extra momentum. This can allow for longer streams after you get a hit, or the ability to cover more space off stage than you previously could have. And optimizing hover usage is going to be a big part of Mewtwo's 3.5 game. So with that covered, I'll get into actually discussing how to play Mewtwo. So some basic strengths of Mewtwo. Right off the bat, he has a projectile. So this can control ground space in front of you really well, forcing people to approach. You can also charge it up. Shadow Ball is really good fully charged, it's about 25%. And it's pretty fast. Now it has 5 more frames to startup. But either versus someone else that's on stage, or versus someone off stage trying to recover, it's a really good option. Next up, his tail is pretty much a sword. It covers a lot of space in front of him, and it can easily beat out characters that don't have large disjointed hitboxes. Another thing he has given to him in Project M is hover canceling. The ability to hover cancel means that you can put some insane shield pressure on your opponent with minimal landing lag. Probably the most obvious one for people who play against Mewtwo is Mewtwo's recovery. You can go some pretty far distances even without up B. So being able to pick large stages that you'll pretty consistently get back from, you'll have an advantage on those stages for sure. Another benefit of his recovery is the ability to auto sweet spot. You don't really have to worry about characters charging forward smash up here and you not barely reaching the ledge, because you'll automatically cling to it if you're above the ledge. Kind of that goes hand in hand with this recovery is Mewtwo's ability to edge guard. Once you get your opponent off stage, you can really go out there or up there to consistently follow up and prevent them from getting back on the stage. A lot of characters, in fact every character I'd say, has their options limited when they're trying to recover. So that's when Mewtwo really shines, trying to land edgeguards that can potentially lead into the kill. Another really big plus that was given to him in Project M is his weight. He lives a lot longer than he did in Melee, and you'll really notice it on big stages again. So his weaknesses. First off, the one I feel the most is his approach game. I'm trying to think of how to explain it. If I have an opponent over here, and I'm trying to hit them, my options are up B, which has landing lag, and I'll probably get punished. I can wave dash in and D-tilt, but that gets crouch cancelled. And I can run in and either FC Nair or FC forward air. But FC Nair is not that big, especially when you're moving forward. And the same thing with FC Fair when you're moving forward. So, yeah, it's kind of hard for Mewtwo to actually run in and hit his opponent. You're going to be playing a much more defensive game, which can potentially be a bad thing if you give your opponent too much space to move around and control the match. Another thing I don't like, or I would call a weakness about Mewtwo, is his out of shield game. You have grab, which can be kind of slow. up smash out of shield, which I really like because of that hitbox near my feet. You also have aerials, obviously, but aerials are pretty slow in comparison to anything else. So he doesn't really have the incredibly fast out of shield game that a lot of other characters have. Another downside is just his size. He's really easy to hit. And that kind of just speaks for itself. Whether it's projectiles or swords, whatever, he's a big character. Another downside is that he's floaty. Once he gets popped into the air, he's going to get comboed. Yeah, you can escape with forward air, but it's very tough to win crouch cancel battles because of how floaty he is. Another downside of being floaty is that you're kind of obvious when you're coming back to the stage. And although you have teleport to mix up where you go, you really cannot be aggressive coming down from the air. And then the biggest weakness that I feel coming from 3.0 to 3.5 is that, yeah, your tail is not a true sword. In 3.0, it kind of didn't matter because it outranged everything. It was huge. But now that it's smaller than, or at least, yeah, I'd say smaller than Marth's sword or Ike's sword or Roy's, you really notice that it's a much harder time just zoning them out with your own tilts and aerials, because they'll hit you and you won't hit them because your tail has hurt boxes on it. Very tiny circles, kind of along the length of it, leading up to right before the bulb. The bulb itself is disjointed, but pretty much leading up to that, you have hurt boxes. Alright, so in this section, I'll be purely talking about mechanical things that you should really perfect. These are things you should be able to do 99% of the time without messing up. First off is wave dashing. Movement in general, but specifically wave dashing. Wave dashing is pretty hard with Mewtwo because, similar to Peach, you can't wave dash if you're still holding jump. Wait, what? Okay, you can. Oh, alright, wow. Yeah, you can. Never mind. Alright, let me rephrase that. So, similar to Peach, not as bad in Melee, I guess I just found out. If you are still holding jump, you'll hover, and that hover will potentially mess up your wave dash. So, you have to let go of jump in order to wave dash. Another thing about wave dashing is that being able to go as horizontal as possible is really important. You can do smaller wave dashes by just going 45, but you can kind of see the difference between almost fully horizontal wave dash and just these small ones that you do by going out of 45. Obviously, yeah, being able to do longer wave dashes, you can be farther away and approach compared to if you can only do shorter wave dashes, you can't cover the same length. Another thing to practice is being able to up B in every direction. Some people tell me they have trouble up being straight down, and I think that's a sign that you're not putting enough time into the game, or that you just started. That's something that you should be able to do really consistently. And it's really important for things like the new ledge stuff. Also, another thing to practice, especially, is the hard to do directions. So, 45, 90, those are 0, those are easy. But like 30 degrees, or slightly forward, there you go. Those are trickier, and they're really important to be able to have as an option available to you when you're under pressure. Another thing similar to Peach to practice is being able to hover low to the ground and out of shield. Hover out of shield is a pretty tight timing because you can't press down until after you're no longer in shield. But this can lead to bigger combos than other out of shield options available to you. Although I think it's a little bit slower. I don't know the exact frame data. Or at least it will be slower if you aren't very good at hover out of shield and you take your time. To hover low to the ground, I like to utilize R as jump. You can set L or Z as jump as well, but I think this is really important, pretty much as important as using the C stick, because this lets you hover, move, and aerial in another direction all at the same time. So you use the C stick to move forward and back air, right? But if you only use Y to jump, you can't really move forward and back air during hover. So instead, I set R to jump, and I really like it. It definitely helps me move in a hover direction, in whichever hover direction I want, and be able to do whichever aerial I want. Another fundamental that you should practice is just spacing. You should tipper everything, especially with Mewtwo. It's almost more important than Marth because only the tip of your tail is disjointed. So if you're playing a character like Luigi and he's using N-Air to get back down to the stage, you really have to hit with the tip of your tail. If you hit with the middle of it, you're going to trade, be popped up above Luigi, and it's going to be a bad time. So being able to utilize your tail to its maximum length is really important. Misspacing it will result in more trades. It'll bring you out of crouch cancel range sooner because you're taking damage. And just make sure you utilize this new training mode, because debug mode is really useful for knowing just exactly how much space your attacks cover. So these fundamentals I'll talk about. Big ones. It's going to be pretty abstract, so sorry in advance. Controlling the stage is really important for Mewtwo. You want to be able to have control of center stage so that your opponent feels pressured to attack into you because they don't want to be near the ledge. Chances are that when they're near the ledge, their options are so limited that they're going to approach you with something that isn't safe and you'll be able to capitalize off of it. It's definitely something to keep in mind with your own games even, how often you do something stupid when you're near the ledge. Other fundamentals just come with time. Things like tech chasing an opponent, knowing which way they're going to tech after you throw them. Things like if something true combos or if you should reset the situation and just maintain positional advantage. Or how to edgeguard someone when they're recovering. These things all come with time. So some fundamentals to practice on if you're really new to the melee, really new to Smash. You should be watching your opponent, not yourself. It's something you might be doing already, or you'll slowly begin to do it over time. But it's a lot more important to see what your opponent is doing than what you are, since you should already know where you are and what you're doing if you're able to consistently do advanced techniques 99% of the time without messing up. Neutral game is the part of the game where your goal is to set up for a situation where you can go for an approach, but prepare yourself to respond to an approach attempt from your opponent. Maybe that's a confusing definition, but I want to emphasize how much of a two-step process getting a hit on your opponent is. Neutral game is the first step. As a definition, I'd call it create a situation that you can, on reaction to seeing the situation, pick an option that will lead to an advantage. Mewtwo's neutral game in particular is pretty campy. You don't have a true sword to approach with, and your run speed is below average. In general, touching your opponent's shield with anything other than a hover cancel aerial, spaced forward tilt, or spaced D tilt will result in you getting hit. Because of this, it's important to bait out approaches from your opponent, and there's a couple ways to do it. Shadow Ball, although a little bit slower, still forces your opponent to work hard to get a good approach. Something big to take away from this guide is that you can win a lot of matches by putting your opponent in a situation they've never been in before. Mewtwo has so many ways to throw Shadow Ball, or fake throwing a Shadow Ball, or threaten with a fully charged Shadow Ball, that making your opponent respect it is pretty important to throwing off their neutral game. Either they try to power shield, or they try to bait out a fully charged Shadow Ball, or they full jump unsafely to get around them. Either way, it's a great tool for gaining an advantage in neutral game. If a character's projectiles aren't being effective, they're going to approach you. Confusion helps ensure that you can engage on your own terms when it comes to slower projectiles like boomerangs and missiles. Once your opponent ends up being close to you, either from your own approaches or theirs, your tail is how you'll either land a hit or force your opponent to block. Hover cancelled up airs and D tilt are your main safe long range tools, but I'll get into more how to use them and other options later. In neutral, making your opponent respect the range that D tilt and up air is how you can force a bad approach. Some things that are risky in neutral is hovering in spots where you don't have frame advantage. So let's say I'm not putting pressure on my opponent's shield, or they're not recovering from end lag. You do not want to really use hover. It's a big commitment because if you get hit out of it, you don't have your second jump, which can result in you dying very early. Once your opponent sees you can't shield too, because you're hovering, they're going to hit you. They're going to try to hit you, and crouch canceling won't be an option. While this can help you punish a whiffed approach, if they do hit, it also means you're out of the second jump, like I said earlier. The other risky approach is up B. I really like up B as an approach. probably too much. But I get punished like crazy with characters that have fast out of shield options, or just fast options that can punish the approach itself. Side B itself can be an approach. Not so much in pure neutral game, but let's say your opponent just teched and they're being defensive. Side B is a really good option because even though it has a lot of startup, you can get big punishes off of it, and the win box can make it slightly more safe than most people realize when they try to punish it. Also, if you are a neutral game and your opponent's stuck above you, confusion is a really good tool to get a hit, since they're going to be afraid of up air or N air as other options. So once you get a punish, I sort of base my punishes on how floating my opponent is. Did I really not reach? Alright, yeah. I sort of group my opponents into different categories. So you have the very fast fallers like Fox, Falco, Wolf, and Captain Falcon. That's kind of one group that I think about when I'm comboing. There's pseudo fast fallers like Lucas, Diddy, and Roy. Characters that are pretty average floatiness, like Mario for example. And the really floaty characters like Mewtwo, Peach, and Luigi. Whether or not it's worth to detail my opponent is usually based on weight and fall speed. Higher weight means I have to deal more damage until I don't need to worry about crouch canceling. Another thing to note is that the tip of my tail has a weaker hitbox. Misplacing, if they block it, will result in you getting grabbed. At low percent, I'll use F air, N air, or up air to get the first hit. And even then I don't expect big damage. I'm just hoping to land a hit or pressure my opponent without much landing lag in response. Landing a grab is the big way to get damage at low percent, but be careful fishing for it because getting one can be pretty tricky. You don't really have the ground movement to approach with grab. Your opponent being in the air is a huge advantage for Mewtwo. Not having to worry about your opponent crouch canceling is huge, and it's pretty easy to land short hop up air, hover, forward air, versus characters that are DIing in. Up air is a great tool to juggle your enemy as it out-prioritizes most of the cast. Any enemy that it doesn't out-prioritize, you can just kind of wait for them to do their option, trying to get back down to the ground to hit you, and then respond with an up air after they whip. At low percent, I'll generally down throw, and then try to get an follow-up after the tech. If it's a true combo, or if the character is really easy to juggle, I'll use up throw to get a good amount of damage. If it's an available option, I'll generally throw my opponent off stage because Mewtwo can tack on a lot of damage to opponent trying to recover. At high percent, you can mix in down throw to up air instead of forward throw if your opponent DIs in, because it can generally guarantee the kill. Learning the chain throw versus Fox, Falco, Wolf, and Falcon is really important to making sure the matchup is in your favor. Generally, at incredibly low percents, like 0 to 10, you can get a regular regrab. After that, string together multiple forward airs. And if they do reach a platform, wave land on to get a regrab. At high percent, you can end the stock with an up throw to back air, or end it with an up throw to up air. You might also see Mewtwo King or me use forward throw to back air, but that generally only works at certain percents, which I don't even know. Which leads into my next point of going off stage. Mewtwo should go off stage. It could be a playstyle thing, but I think keeping your opponent off stage can often lead to more damage than a true combo would at center stage. Especially with nerfed recoveries, this can definitely lead into the kill better than a true combo. Two unique ways to go off stage are grounded up B and hover. Up B, turn around into back air, is a pretty straightforward and covers a lot of directions, with how many different ways you can up B. I like to bait my opponent into recovering high, and then hit them with back air after they second jump, because a character without a second jump has a really tough time recovering. There's a couple ways to hover off stage. You'll see Armada, he'll get his opponent off stage, drop down, and then hover low. You can do the same thing, but without turnips. This is a pretty tricky option to utilize. You can also edge guard using hover, either by wave dashing and then leading straight into a hover, or wave dashing to grab the ledge and then hovering low like so. If you used your up B to grab the ledge, you will second jump instead of hovering, so that's something to be mindful of if you want to utilize this option. Along with hover tricks, Mewtwo has the vanilla option of simply second jumping off stage and using your giant up air to keep your opponent off stage. It might not be as flashy as other options, but it's still pretty good because second jump will let you move a lot faster vertically than hover. The other benefit of second jumping is that you can do it at any time. You can spend a lot of time off stage, and the longer you're in the air next to your opponent, the more pressure they're going to feel to act. And the more pressure you put on your opponent to act when they're off stage, the more likely they will be to mess up their recovery. Both across multiple games and multiple times in the same round, it's important that you keep trying to edgeguard your opponent. The more opportunities you go for an edgeguard off stage, the more opportunities you have to learn their recovery patterns. All it takes is one successful edgeguard to result in a low percent gimp that can win you the game. Another offensive tool that Mewtwo has is fully charged Shadow Ball. I'll use it out of horizontal up B as a sort of frame trap, or to punish my opponent for trying to hit me when I up B. Additionally, if they're shielding and try to hit you out of something, it's slower than an actual aerial attack, so they'll often drop their shield before the Shadow Ball hits. The easiest time to hit with a Shadow Ball is when your opponent is off stage, since they don't have shielding as an option available to them, and air dodging might result in their death. Just having a fully charged Shadow Ball can force your opponent to respect it being shot at any time. The downside of having a fully charged Shadow Ball is that you will not be able to use uncharged ones to control the neutral game. So the decision to hold on to a charge until it gets you a kill is sometimes a hard one to make. I don't really have an answer for when to shoot uncharged Shadow Balls to control space, or when to hang back and fully charge Shadow Ball to go for a kill. One good thing to keep in mind when talking about all this offense is don't overextend. If ever you whiff or end up above your opponent because of hover, you're going to put yourself at a positional disadvantage, and being closer to the center stage or closer to the ground is really important in Super Smash Bros. If ever your combo or pressure or edge guard causes you to lose this advantage, then it means you screwed up. It's tempting to go for the super deep hover combos, but I assure you that if your opponent gets to the ground first and punishes you, it wasn't worth it. And since a lot of combos are falling faster than you, you're going to get comboed. So there's a couple points in Smash where you can try to prevent taking more damage, which is what I'd call defense. I'll talk about what to do when you crouch cancel, what to do when you're stuck in shield, and what to do when you're stuck in a mid-air combo. Versus characters that have to hit you with their body, crouch cancel grab is a really good option. Crouch cancel detail is also a really good option because of the space it covers in front of you. Be careful getting stuck in D-tilt wars with characters like Roy, Toon Link, Meta Knight, because often, unless your opponent is at a much higher percent than you, you will lose and end up getting fully comboed. One big part of PM is knowing which moves you should not crouch cancel, and I can't really name them all. Lucas's pressure, Mewtwo's N-Air, obviously powerful moves from Ganon or Captain Falcon, but I can't really name them all off the top of my head. It's something that will come with time, what you can and can't crouch cancel. Is he really not going to approach? I'll cover DI briefly, but first off, I kind of suck at DI, so don't expect me to have any kind of amazing insight. Generally, combo DI is holding out to avoid combos, and recovery DI is holding in to avoid dying. Realistically, Mewtwo is floating enough that you can sometimes just hold up to handle both situations moderately well. Yeah, maybe holding up to handle both situations is why I'm so bad at DI. To break out of actually getting comboed, easiest and biggest reward is forward air. Forward air is now 1 frame slower than N air, but N air is really tiny, so it doesn't really help you break out of combos as much as forward air does. The fastest option to break out of combos is actually air dodge. I don't really know how to mash out of stun so that you can air dodge faster. I think it's just doing a circle. Maybe there's some other trick to it, since you can see I'm kind of slow. Maybe it's dash dancing. But if I can figure it out, this is definitely the best way to escape combos. The way I do it, which is probably 100% wrong, is jump and air dodge. I'm sure there's some way to do it where you spin the stick or something. I really can't get it. I just jump and air dodge. It's something to practice, even though I have a lot of trouble remembering to use it under pressure. Recovery is something that takes a long time to learn. There are still really good Mewtwo's who don't know how to recover correctly, so this is a pretty important part of the guide in my opinion. Here's a golden rule I have while recovering. First, focus on getting to the ledge, then get to the stage. Doing an up B from off stage, 45 degrees up, trying to get to a platform or center stage is incredibly greedy and unsafe. It's pretty easy to gauge if your opponent is able to get to the ledge before you, unless it's the Ditto. Mewtwo has awesome tools to get from the ledge to the stage, so there's no real reason to not aim for the ledge when recovering. To get to the ledge, save your second jump. Don't second jump to break out a stun, because while it's important to switch up recovery, recovering high makes it easy for your opponent to reach you than if you recover low. After second jumping, Mewtwo has a super sweet spot by angling up B down towards the ledge. So the ultimate goal when recovering is position yourself where that's an option. The worst thing you can do is up B 45 degrees up and forward when your opponent is waiting for you on the stage. Granted, this being a bad option turns it into something that is worth doing sometimes, but definitely break this habit if it's your current method of recovery. Some other tricks to recovering is that hover can actually send you a lot farther when recovering than second jump. I found the best way to do this is by forward air, then hovering, and then using down air to extend your second jump. And you can see just how far Mewtwo can go. Shoutouts to youngster Joey for figuring that out. Extending hover might work with other aerials too. I was just specifically told to use down air. Realistically, I just started experimenting with this, so it's something that I'm not too good at utilizing yet, and I don't really know that much about it. But it's something that I feel like other people should be aware about, and who knows, maybe you can figure out how to use it better than I can. So briefly, I'll go over Brawl Blocks. Before debug mode, this is what I use to check out frame data, and the big thing to take away is just actually seeing what your tail looks like. You can see you have incredibly small hurt boxes all on the back of your tail. So your tail is about as high priority as you can get without being a true sword, and you'll notice that the entire bulb at the end has no hurt boxes at all. So I'll briefly talk about Mewtwo's best moves. So forward air is really good, but I don't know. In reality, it doesn't feel as large as people think. Maybe that's just me being a Mewtwo main. But otherwise, it comes out frame 6. You can do frame by frame advance in Brawl Box. I think there. Oh, what the heck? It says frame 5. Maybe I have not 3. No, I have 3.5 open. I don't know. I don't know. Not gonna worry about it. Trust me, that's frame 6. So up air is probably my favorite move. It's awesome. It's huge. It's can I loop this? Yeah. Up air is huge. It's disjointed. You can hover cancel it. It juggles. It sends them off stage. It hits in front of you and above you. It links into itself. It deals pretty good damage. And yeah, just overall, I think this is Mewtwo's best move. I'll see if I'll go even slower for you guys. But yeah, I think up air is Mewtwo's best move. So N air is pretty amazing. It's active on frame 5. So with forward air being 6, I'm pretty sure this is Mewtwo's fastest move. fastest aerial. It deals close to 20% if all of the hits connect. The strong hit at the end is also makes Mewtwo pretty resilient to crouch canceling, especially since the attack deals so much damage, it can bring people outside of crouch cancel range. Another point to make is just how strong it is on shield. Assuming you've dealt some amount of shield damage, one of those 4 tiny hitboxes is probably going to poke. This move also has insanely low lag if you're still in the air after the final hit, so intentionally whiffing the attack to bait out approaches can be really strong as well. Down tilt IASA, getting moved up 4 frames earlier, is like the saving grace of 3.5 Mewtwo. It means that your forward air and up B follow-ups can still work at roughly the same percent as 3.02, just with a different timing. That is to say, down tilt into forward air, down tilt into up B forward air. They still work because you can cancel D tilt so much earlier now. So this is definitely a strong move. Just be careful because that tip of the tail that is disjointed is a weaker hitbox. So in this section, I won't be discussing specific matchups, just how to go about analyzing a matchup yourself and how to handle it. This is because there are so many matchups in PM that going through all of them would just be really time consuming, and frankly, I don't really know all the matchups. So here's how I go about thinking about a matchup. First, I have a sword. It's not really a sword. It's the lowest priority out of all the swords in the game, but it's still a sword. This is a good way to handle matchups where you can out-prioritize opponents easily. Just spam your moves that will zone them out. Next up, I think about how I have a projectile. A lot of opponents don't really get phased by Shadow Balls. They just try to power shield or break them. If that's the case, they aren't approaching, and you really already limited their options because they're not approaching you. In the case that they do have a projectile, you can either break it with up air to force an approach, which is especially useful versus Mario Fireballs, reflect it with side B to force an approach, which is useful versus bombs or boomerangs, or C, still just spam Shadow Ball and force an approach. This works with really only certain characters' projectiles, but still something to think about. Holding onto the lead in these zoning versus zoning matchups is really important, and conversely, don't get too aggro just because you're forced to approach. The next thing I think about in a matchup is, can they be gimped? If so, I put a big emphasis on getting that gimp, because otherwise it's really hard for Mewtwo to win in just neutral game versus neutral game. Getting gimps is Mewtwo's biggest comeback factor. So if you lose the lead, definitely get them to a point where they are off stage struggling to recover. If they can't be gimped, then their neutral game is probably worse since their recovery is so good, and you can try to win by just playing an honest game where you deal about 500%. As a closing note to my Mewtwo guide, it might sound obvious or maybe too abstract, but don't get hit. You'll find a common trait in tournament is that a lot of people that do well don't go for these really hard reads because your opponent is watching you. If you whiff something unsafe, you're going to get hit. This is a pretty big deal in PM, where a hard punish is a pretty big gap from just trading. In Melee, you are either at a percent that you can still crouch cancel, or you're at kill percent with no in between. And PM is a lot more about dealing more damage than your opponent, because gimps and 0 to deaths aren't as prevalent. In PM, you're getting your opponent to 100 plus just about every stock, and half the time you're killing off a throw. I feel comfortable saying that what percent you are at matters even more than Melee, so seriously, don't get hit. Thanks for watching. Feel free to ask anything in the YouTube comments section, and I'll probably either directly respond or do a follow-up video for the really good questions.